And joining us from Gothenburg, Sweden, Johan Sjöström, researcher at RISE, Sweden's Independent Government Research Institute. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
We're going to try in a moment to reconnect with Sarah Morris, our correspondent in Spain, and get the latest there. So let's begin, if you will, with what's happened here in France, where I guess we're feeling kind of the same shock that you felt back in 2018 when you had those giant fires basically across the country at the time.
Yeah, it's very much the same thing, and usually it's when weather is drier and a lot warmer than it usually is. That's the main problem, not the actual level. I mean, France, southern Spain has this weather all the time, but now up in northern France, it's a bigger problem locally. I've seen the weather past days has been really, really bad because soaring temperature means very, very dry air, and aided then by very strong winds and especially strong wind gusts, it makes this very difficult fire to extinguish.
Yeah, it's already been listed as the second biggest fire in northern France since this century. There was one that was bigger in the west of the country back in 2022. Everybody caught off guard by the fact that we've never had these Canadair water bombing planes here in the Paris area, in the Fontainebleau forest. What could have been done differently?
It's very difficult to say because there's been not only one heat wave, but I think now three. So vegetation is in a really, really poor state, which means that when a fire breaks out like this did with multiple location, it gets very difficult. Now, this is not unique to northern France. We've seen this in Germany, in Czech Republic, in Poland, past few years when we have these summer after summer with very, very hot and dry temperatures. Of course, there are things you could do. You could prepare, but there are conflicts of interest in these preparedness. Of course, resources are limited, and fire is not always on the top of everyone's agenda. So I mean, short term, this fire will. I think there's a good chance that it will be extinguished tonight. I mean, the wind is going down, temperatures are going down, and the wind direction is also changing. So as long as I can keep the containment line on the back, then they have a good chance at least. If not, then they have a huge problem on the other side of the fire. In a little longer perspective, there are land management strategies that one can use. Of course, these have to be tailored a bit to the specific region, and a lot of research is done either up north in the Boreal, where I am, or further south in the Mediterranean. So not much is done in Central Europe on land management strategies for at least forest fires a lot. I mean, this region is more famous for fires in grasslands and in agricultural lands. But there are things that we know, for example, this region.
Yeah? Go ahead. I was just going to say, for the French, who you talk about, people forget. There had been years of drought, and yet this winter we had plenty of water. It rained a lot. All the aquifers were filled. So could something have been done between winter and now?
This is the pattern we also saw in Spain the past 2 years. Lots of rain during winter, which feeds vegetation. Of course, a very light vegetation feeds a lot. There will be a lot of things that can burn really bad once you have heat waves, and now you had really, really bad heat waves. So that combination is of course very difficult, and one could have of course seen this coming in that sense. And be a little more active in preparedness. We have in Sweden we have planes that they go across the country. You move them around, 4 of them, and a number of helicopters where the fire danger is highest at the moment. But I mean, At the same time, there were large fires in southern France. So this is a resource question, and it's difficult and not so easy to fix. But in a little longer perspective, there are. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say Sweden and Cyprus, which have helped out with aircraft. With this fire here in the Paris area. Johan, stay with us because we are going to now be able to connect with our correspondent in Spain, Sarah Morris. Sarah, we were just discussing the situation in France where people are stunned to see these fires take place. Before I ask you about the Prime Minister's remarks there, talking about more to be done on prevention, just give us an update quickly on the latest, what with the death toll rising and people still missing in that southern Almeria province.
13 people are dead after a 93-year-old British woman didn't survive in hospital from bad burns. And I was saying that now the actual process of identifying some of the victims whose bodies were badly burned is starting to be completed. So we've had the confirmation that there was a French victim, a Belgian victim, an American woman and Spanish man who were a couple, a British couple, and I think that brings up the total. So, but obviously it's being quite a slow. Of course, the consulates have with getting genetics.
All right, apologies, Sarah. Now we seem to be having audio issues, so we'll cross back to you. Johan Sjöström, you were saying at the outset how in Spain they're much more used to forest fires, but in the case of the Almeria fire, there's complaints that bad cell phone reception means that people didn't know they were supposed to take the alternate routes, hence the high death toll. By the way, the amounts of land that burned are much bigger than here in the Paris area. Are the Spanish, the Italians, the people in southern France getting better at fighting these fires?
They are getting better, actually. But what is lacking at the moment is a bit more structured ways of executing land management strategies. So how do we? Because I mean, in Spain and Italy, there's a lot of rural abandonment. So there are lots of previous pastures, for example, that are now grown into bushlands and into forests, and that's a huge problem for them. That's not the same thing that we see now in Fontainebleau. But they have definitely that problem, and they have to really focus on doing a strategic new uses of land. So resettle grazing animals, for example, not everywhere, but in strategic places. So you can sort of diversify the landscape a little more. So you can have areas where it's easier to stop fires. And that is something that they are working with, but it takes time because people own the land. There are conflicts of interest. It takes money. It's far more easier to buy 2 more helicopters than to actually change the way we use our landscapes.
One of the complaints here in France has been that a lot of hedgerows have been destroyed. Would hedgerows help?
Yeah, some if they are of the right species, of course. Conifers is usually a big problem in all the wildfires. Here in Fontainebleau, there's lots of pine trees, and they become very flammable when you have these temperatures for a long time without rain. There are ways that you can, especially along roads, introduce more birch trees, for example, instead of oaks that they have here in Fontainebleau. We know that helps a lot, and that makes it easier for the rescue services to stop the fire at a certain point, because then the intensity decreases just where they want to stop it. So that's on the middle perspective time. You could start manage the land that way. But I mean, in the long run, we have to look at at our climate. I mean, both the Southern Europe and Central Europe has seen these reoccurring fire summers, very hot, very dry weather for a long time now. So we have to think that this is maybe a new normal, and take actions.
So it may
as of
be a
that.
new normal. What does that mean in terms of the species of trees? You talk there about how birches are less flammable than oaks. Are there certain species of trees we just won't see anymore in Northern Europe?
Well, I mean, all the vegetation is sort of slowly pushing itself up north. So that is something we see in Sweden. Sweden is very long, and I think that's something you see also in France. But there are still species that will be flammable and they will go up. So that's it's something that we as people have to actually go and intentionally make sure that there are the right species. Not everywhere, but in certain strategic places. And I mean, most of Europe has been very, very heavily exploited for agriculture and grazing for hundreds of years. So that's nothing new. It's not really wild land across Europe. Whereas this is one of the regions where you actually have an intact forest. So of course here it's been a bit more difficult. But again, there are lots of roads in this area. So there are good possibilities to
What
do more strategic actions.
more strategic actions among the immediate strategic actions we've seen with the forest fires, not just here in the Paris area, but across France, is you've had these citizen watch groups when it's when there's a high risk of fire that have been going around. In some instances, Johan, they've caught people red-handed trying to start fires. The French Interior Ministry says some 10% of the wildfires we see are produced by humans, and there's high suspicions regarding the Fontainebleau one, what with the flames erupting on both sides of the A6 motorway. Mm-hmm. People just have a hard time getting their head around why anyone would want to start a fire.
Yeah, that is something that is normally very difficult to understand, but it happens. It happens all across the world, and I think that we have to just picture ourselves that fires will start either by neglect or by accidents or actually intent. That's another problem, but fires will start. It's been starting fires for hundreds of years because people start fires. So we cannot stop them by just saying they won't ignite. We have to make sure that they will ignite, and we have to make sure that we can stop them at an early instance. And in this case, it became big really fast, and then as it grows, it becomes exponentially more difficult to organize the suppression efforts and to actually contain it. But this evening, from the looks of the weather forecast and with the amount of roads that you have in the area, I think there is a good chance for this particular fire, at least.
All right. Well, we sure hope so. I want to thank you so much, Johan Sjöström, for joining us from Gothenburg, Sweden.